recording feature on.
Welcome, Dallas educators, to creating items and tests in Schoolnet. During this webinar, I will be presenting the content from a high level via the PowerPoint, and then I'm going to go live on the Dallas demo or training site. At any time, you can pause the recording and try the activities I'm showing on your own, and then you can restart the recording when you are ready to move on. This webinar is part one of a three-part series, and this part one is really just about how to create the items and tests in Schoolnet. So my two goals for you is to locate and create items, and then also to create an assessment. One of the things we like to share is where can you find helpful resources. So this webinar is kind of a straight through. We do have lots of helpful materials, we call them quick reference cards, that are available on the website. You can access PowerPoint presentations. You can also find the little orange help anytime you're on a screen. So anytime you see that little orange question mark, you can click that. And then for any hardware and software questions, at the footer of every screen, you'll see system requirements, and that will help you as well. So what is Assessment Admin? Assessment Admin is the area in Schoolnet that you will build tests and monitor the collection of results. Any data or information that is collected from these assessments are available in the other two modules of Schoolnet, within Classrooms and School and District Data modules. In part 3 of the webinar series, you will be able to find out how to access the reports. But for today, we're just going to focus on entering in items and tests in the Assessment Admin module. So here's a brief overview of the testing process in the system. The first step is really what we call the heavy lift. This is where you're going to create your tests and you'll get a test score key. Once that's completed and you're ready to move on with scheduling, you can then print out your answer sheets, booklets, or even access student usernames. You'll then administer the test to students, and then you'll either scan your results or you will collect them or you can scan the results, or you'll be administering it online where the data gets collected instantly. And then at that point, you can analyze any of the performance data, and all of that will be available online as well. So when you go into the system, you have the ability to create several different item types. Now I'll talk a little bit more about this when we go live, but you can see from this screen that we have multiple choice, true, false, gridded, open response, and then we have some technology enhanced items. That's where you'd find the hotspots, the drag and drops. So when you're using different types of items, you'll want to be sure how you can administer them. If you're doing a paper and pencil test, then you'll want to kind of stick with the first 6 item types. If it's online, then you can use all the item types. In today's example, I'm going to create a multiple choice question and an inline response question. I will also talk about passages and rubrics, but it'll just be kind of up from the PowerPoint. So anytime you decide to create an item, you'll receive what we call our text editor. And this is similar to any other kind of HTML editor or word processor editor, anything that you usually see, where you can change the font, the size, the style, the color. We also have a grammar check, a spell check. We have an equation editor and different symbols, and I'll walk through that as well. So as I mentioned, you can insert images. One of the things you'll want to keep in mind when it comes to inserting images, you do not copy and paste the image. They must be inserted or uploaded. And some of the best practices are to resize the images before adding them, and also preview the item within the item type. These are the 3 file formats that are supported as well. We do have an equation editor, and it works a little bit differently than what some of my math folks out there might be used to. It gives us the syntax. and we have to change the syntax of the equation editor. So over here on the left side, you're going to see that it's the x and the y coordinates that I have to change to make it kind of a fraction in this example. Down here are the most common shortcuts for the equations, but there's a link to additional equations, and all this is going to provide you with is the syntax to change. So once you enter in that syntax and enter in the equation, then you can basically insert it into your question, and it becomes an image almost. And to edit it, you have to select the equation again and then click on Equation Editor. And I'll demonstrate entering something like that in as well. So at any time, you have the ability to add manipulatives and tools to any of your assessment items. We have calculators, we have rulers, we have a protractor, we have a compass. You have the ability to attach these tools to each individual item, or you even have the ability to attach it to the whole test. And I will demonstrate that when we get live on the site. But as you can see from the screen, if I chose either a calculator or a ruler, I do have some options of different types of rulers or calculators that I can choose. You may also see this screen. This allows you to attach any reference sheets. So let's say you're doing a science question and you want to attach the periodic table. You have the ability to attach that as well. So as I mentioned, there's some technology-enhanced items. I'm not going to demonstrate the hotspots today, but basically what a hotspot is, we have a single and a multiple selection type where you can upload an image. So let's say you have a map of Texas and you wanted to have the students select the 3 largest cities. What you would do is you would upload the map into the Canvas area, and then you would create 3 individual, what we call hotspots, on that map, that when the student takes it, they'd actually click on the correct response. So just be aware that we do have a QRC on how to create this particular item type, but for our lack of time, I'm not going to be demonstrating this one. But this is definitely a technology-enhanced item, and you'd have to administer the assessments online to use this item type. Now, at any point when you are creating an item and you have the option to save, you'll be brought to a screen like this. And you as a teacher have a couple of items. You really only have the ability to save it to yourself, which is only to me, or you could share it with others in your school. At this point, the best option for teachers are just to save it to themselves, or if I'm collaborating with another teacher on my items, I can co-author those items with them. And you would select this area here, and then you would type in a teacher's name. Again, we have a quick reference card that references how to co-author, but co-authoring, it really helps you to collaborate on items. If you are working and you want to actually just share those with everyone at your school, you'd have to submit them for approval. And we're going to talk just briefly about that as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go live on the site and I'm going to demonstrate how to create a multiple choice and an inline response item. So I'm going to log in as a teacher, and I'm going to hover over Assessment Admin. Now, one of the things you want to make sure is that you want to be sure that you stay along the lines of the subject and the grade range that you teach, especially for these webinars, because we'll want you to keep kind of the same theme so you'll be able to assign and schedule assessments. So I'm going to hover over Assessment and I'm going to choose Create. Now at this point I can create a test or I can create an item. So I'm going to select Create an Item. And then I'm going to be brought to this screen. As I mentioned, there's kind of 10 or 11 different types of items I can create, and I'm going to stick with the multiple choice. When I'm brought to this screen, the top section is required for any item type you create. You're going to have to choose a subject, a grade level, and a standard. So for this example, I'm going to choose math, and I'm going to choose 7th grade. And I'm going to keep my question language and response language as English, but you do have the ability to change it if you want the students to reply in Spanish. And the open response question type is available to have the students respond in Spanish. So then I'm going to look up my standard to see what standard set I need to choose. I'm going to select I'm going to select this standard set. It will default to the subject and the grade level. Notice that I have a plus sign, and you only want to assign one standard to each item. I can expand that area, and then I can just click on the checkbox here and say done. And now you'll see that that item, that standard is aligned. Scroll down a little bit, you'll see that I have some properties that I can add. If I want to add a keyword right here, I can expand it. If I really want to spend some time looking at kind of the web DOK level, I can add that to the item. I can even add Bloom's taxonomy, kind of labeling to it if I like. All of this area is not required, and all it helps is when others search for a particular item. The system will default to what your name is, and you can take your name out, but we like to keep it there. So again, this whole area, you can expand it, is just for kind of searching purposes. So I'm going to go to my Word document here, so I can copy and paste from text. So if you already have items, you can easily cut and paste text, but again, you have to insert images. And for my question, I have to click here. I get my little editor. I can make the screen a little bit bigger if I like, and I'm just going to paste my question in. Now, as you can see, I can change it to bold, italic. I can actually click in the equation editor right here, and this is going to show you, again, this is my pop-up was blocked, so that might happen to you. I'm going to make sure. Now I'll click on it again and it should appear. And again, this is showing me the syntax. So if I want to choose just a fraction here, make this smaller, I can delete what's in there, click on this fraction, and I have to choose the X and the Y coordinates. So if I'm just trying to say 3/4, I can see that that's what it's going to look like. Make this a little bit bigger. I can choose save, and as you can see, it automatically put it into my text editor. I can click on it and click on the equation editor again, and then I can make changes if I like. I'm just going to leave that in my question for now. I'm also going to enter in an image. So from here, I'm going to click on my insert image, and then I'm going to navigate to where my folder is, and there is my image for Lemonade. Now it came in pretty big, so I can make it a lot smaller in here, but we suggest also that you make sure that your images are, resized before you bring them in. But you can bring them in and resize them in here to fit the screen. And now I'm going to choose Save, and now you can see that this is my question content. So what I'm going to have to do is enter in my answer choices here. So I have the option to look at, put them in one column or two columns across and then down, but I still have to enter in every single answer choice. So I can kind of copy and paste in here. Again, it's just going to be the text editor, and it's easier to copy and paste so I don't make any errors. but I can do a spell check as well. And 7 1/4 cups is what is the correct response. So after I enter in that correct response, and I could be using the equation editor if I like for these fractions. So I have to select which item is the correct response, or which answer choice is the correct response. D is the correct response, and the system will automatically default to 1 point. Now, if this question had more than 1 point, I could change this, but for now we're going to keep it at 1 point. Now, as I mentioned, we have the tools and manipulatives. So if you wanted to provide the students with a calculator, you could add that here. And I also mentioned about the formula reference sheet. So if you wanted to, you could access the formula reference sheet here. At this point, I want to save and preview it with my manipulative so I can see what it's going to look like. And then this is the actual question the students would see. There's my calculator right there. So if I wanted the students to use that to add it, they'd know to look up here. I'm going to go ahead and X that out. And then at this point, I'm going to go ahead and save. And now, as you can see, I want to be sure to only save it to me. That's the best option to do to begin with. And now I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now I'm going to create an inline response. So I'm going to click on Assessment Admin. I'm going to choose Create. I'm going to choose Create an Item. And then I'm going to select Inline Response. Now again, just like before, I have to choose a subject. And this one I'm actually going to make it science, even though I teach math. And I'm going to choose 7th. I'm going to select the standard document. Change the grade level. Oh, there's a 1 for 7, so I'll choose 8. Click on the plus sign, and then I'm going to click on the standard. Now, as you know, all of this at the top is required. And now I have to enter in the content of my question. Let me go back to my Word document, and I'm going to copy and paste. Now, how the inline response works is any word, and I've highlighted them here, that I want to use as kind of the fill in the blank, we have to insert it as a gap. So I'm going to highlight the word and select Insert Gap. And I'm going to highlight this word and insert a gap too. And at this point, basically, we're going to have the students fill in the blank for these two options. So I'm going to choose Save. Now there's my question content, and then the numbers down here are what's going to show the gaps. So my answer choices are kinetic, resting, and again, if I wanted to, I could copy and paste from the from my Word document, and then it's potential. So because I'm going to use the same words in both gaps, I have to select which one is correct for the first gap and then for the second gap separately. So the first gap's correct response is potential. Now I'm going to go to the second gap, and I'm going to type in those same words. And then I'm going to select, this is why I copy and paste, because I type in the wrong responses. Then I'm going to copy and paste the correct response for the second gap. Now notice that you have an option to add new choices or remove a choice. So if you wanted to put some distractors there, you could easily do that. I'm going to scroll down. Again, I can enable the tools and manipulatives, or I can save and preview. So I'm going to save and preview. Scroll down a little bit. And then what you'll see is as the student reads through the question, they'll have the drop-down options here. And then again, I'm going to select Save. I want to save it only to me to begin with. And then at this point, I have completed creating items, and then we want to find those items. So when I hover over Assessment Admin, I can click right here into Find an Item or Passage. And I have a couple of ways I can search. The easiest is to search by Created By. Because as you can see, I can see what the whole district item bank is, or I can see the items that were just created by me. And as you can see, there's my inline and there's my multiple choice. If I need to go in and make any edits at this time, I can do that here. So at this point, if you'd like to pause the recording and create your own items, you feel free to do that. Now, if you are practicing, it will help to stay in the same grade level and subject that you teach. So it will be easier to create your assessments later. Then just return to this recording when you are ready to continue, or if you're just sitting watching, we're going to move back to the PowerPoint, and I'm going to talk about kind of the rubrics and open responses and passages. So you have the ability to create a passage. And a passage is a nice item type to use if you have multiple questions. You can even have a map as a passage, anything that would have multiple item types with it. Now, when you create open response items, you also have the ability to add a rubric. You can use a single or a multi-dimensional rubric. And all of that information on how to create those are in our quick reference cards. Now, as I mentioned, any user can submit an item or item, passage, or rubric to be shared. So when you share that with others, it will have to be approved at your default institution. And then once that item is approved, the submitter, meaning you as the teacher, can no longer edit the content. And there is information on how to submit in our quick reference card. So now let's talk about creating and scheduling a test. There are two ways to create a test. There's the express test or the manual test. The express test is a really quick and fast way to select standards you want covered, and then the system will automatically generate any items that correlate to that standard. Or you can create a test manually, which is what I'm going to demonstrate, where you find items, or you can even write or create your own in the assessment itself. So when you create the manual method, you'll be given the ability to add items from here, and again, you can create them. You'll work your way through stages. For today and until our next webinar, you're going to stay in what we call the private draft stage. I'll talk very briefly about the items on the left, but when we talk about scheduling and administering assessment, we're going to work our way through that. So I'm going to create a test with the items I created, and then I'm going to add some additional items from the item bank. So I'm going to go back to Assessment Admin, and from here, I'm going to choose Create again, but I'm going to create a test manually, and I'm going to start that now. So from here, just for my purposes, I'm going to call my test the DISD sample, and I'm going to put my initials at the end. Now, one of the things you'll want to be sure is you choose a subject and grade level that you teach, because it'll just help when it gets to be scheduling and administering. And then for the system, best practice is to take this down to 1. Just makes it a lot easier to work with. I'm going to choose 1. If your assessment is all multiple choice, you can select that. But for our example, since we're searching for the items and we're not creating them in the test themselves, I don't have to check that off. Now, teachers are permissioned to create these 3 item types. We're going to stick with my classroom, and I have a slide that talks about the different types. But if you want to create a test and share it with other teachers in your school, you can do the common assessment. So there's going to be some other items that you can select on this screen. Do you want to hide item content from test results? This basically, if parents and students have access, they will be able to view the item content. The system defaults to no, but again, you can change that if you want to make it available. Unanswered questions. If you want to just give the opportunity for students, if they don't answer the question, to not include it in the score, you can select that. Now, we have 3 different score types. 99% of the assessments are done by total score, but we have a proficiency score or a raw score. The raw score would basically show like 5 out of 10 were correct and so on. You do highly suggest that we change the preferred standards document, and I'm going to change it to math, even though I have a science item on my assessment here. So now I'm going to scroll down. We are entering items, so it's not an answer key only. And if I want to add assessment notes, just information about the assessment at a later date, I can change this to yes. And then when I use this test later on, I have some information for myself. Now remember I mentioned about using the tools and manipulatives per item? You also have the ability to enable that for the whole test. So if you're not sure if the items are using tools, I can enable that. So if I wanted to have the inch ruler and a protractor and just the regular calculator and the compass, I can select all that here. If I have some open responses, I can change and alter the text formatting toolbar as well. I'm going to click on test settings. Again, this is an area, these are all optional. If you're administering it online, do you want students to comment at the end? Do you want to have the teachers put comments on answer sheets? And so on. What do you want to be able to print? The system defaults to having everything, and usually for classroom tests, we keep the system default. The last is the co-authoring settings, and this is again if you want to share this, but for Dallas, this is not needed since all teachers have the ability to share the assessments using that category. So if you wanted to share it, you would choose the common assessment. So at this point, I'm going to generate my test. And now it's going to ask me, do you want to create an item from scratch, or do you want to look up an item? So I'm going to select look up the item. And remember when I searched for me, I selected me, and I'm going to view my results. And then I'm going to select all the items that I want to add to my test. And what you'll see is that I'll be brought to my test that's starting with 2 items. And now maybe I want to add another item. And maybe I want to look it up in the whole district, and now I want to sort by subject. I want to trash that I was created by. So I want to look at math for 7th grade. And it tells you the number of items that are available. I can even go down to standard. And when I go to standard, you can see it tells me how many items are available for that particular standard. So I can select that standard, view my results, and then if this is the item I want to use, I can view it, I can preview it, I can add that item to my test. Now, as I've added these items, you'll see that it says, warning, item 3 contains errors that must be resolved before continuing. So I'm going to scroll down to my item 3 and see what the issue is. Well, it looks like it says I need to add content. So maybe what I'm going to do is just remove this item from my test. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And then at this point, I'm going to just review what I see here. I want to leave my test in a private draft. And in our next webinar, we're going to talk about all these different tools that are available. But again, if I want to add an item, I can look it up in Item Central. view some results here, maybe find another item, click on it, and add that item to my test. And basically, that's it. I've created an assessment, and this is basically what I want you all to do before we meet for the next session. So you want to create an item, create items, and create an assessment. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint, and I'm going to talk through some final things. So as I mentioned, there's an express test method, and you have the ability to create an express test, but you choose the standards, and then you'll know how many items are available in the system already created that are made public to you, and you're going to tell it how many items, and then you build the express test, and then you'll be in the same place that we just ended. You'll have your test created in draft mode. I did talk about different test stages. Depending on your assessment that you're creating, a classroom test will just have a private draft. If you have a common classroom test, you will have the public draft available, and this means you'll have the ability to share this with other teachers at your school. Then we're going to move into our ready to schedule and our schedule and our in progress and then complete stages. And we're going to talk about those in the next webinar. So how do you find your test? Very easily, the same way I went to find an item. I hovered over Assessment Admin, and I went to Find a Test. I search for my test name or go to my dashboard. There's a variety of ways that you can access it. So when we go into part 2 of the webinar, it'll be on scheduling. We're going to go over the test properties and details. We're going to modify the score group or item numbering. We're going to make sure we preview it online. We're going to talk about test dates because they have big implications. Then we're also going to talk about the different ways to administer a test. You can do this online, by paper, or you can also bulk upload results. And then in the part 3 webinar, we're going to talk about where are the results for educators. Where can teachers see the results? And that's going to be in part 3. So I want to thank you very much for your time. My next webinar will be scheduling and administering assessments. Now, my only kind of suggestion to you is to be successful in this next webinar, please have a created test with items, and then we will focus on how to get our tests ready to schedule and then how to administer them. Same thing when you're creating items. You want to stick with the same subject and grade level. So again, thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you at another webinar.